I was standing under the bright boutique lights when my daughter's voice sliced through the soft music. "Not this one," she said loudly, lifting the simple blue dress I had quietly chosen. "It looks like something poor people wear." The words didn't just fall, they landed hard. A few customers turned. One woman paused mid-step. The cashier froze with a folded shawl in her hand. And I simply held the edge of the counter, as if the polished wood could steady the shaking inside me. My daughter didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and pretended not to. She was scrolling through her phone, smiling as if nothing cruel had been said. "Mom, please," she added, almost laughing. "Try something classy. You can't just pick anything." She placed the dress back with a careless flick, the fabric collapsing like a small, tired sigh. I didn't say a word. Not because I agreed, but because the lump in my throat rose too quickly, too sharply. The dress wasn't expensive. But it was the first thing in months that had reminded me of the old days, when she used to tug my hand and say, "Mama, wear this one. You'll look pretty." Strange how children grow tall and their words grow sharper. The boutique felt colder as I lifted the dress again, smoothing the wrinkles she had left. The stitching was neat. The color soft. I had picked it because something about it felt gentle, something I wished she still was. Behind me, two girls whispered, "Was that her mom?" followed by a small, uncomfortable silence. My daughter pretended not to hear. She drifted toward the mirror section, fixing her hair, admiring her reflection as if the world outside it didn't exist. I held the dress close to my chest, not caring who saw. Sometimes betrayal doesn't shout. Sometimes, it stands right beside you, smiling. When we returned home that evening, the house felt unusually still, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. My daughter went straight to her room, humming softly, as if the moment in the boutique had never happened. I stayed in the living room, folding the dress she had mocked, smoothing its sleeves the way a mother smooths the worries of a child. Her bag lay on the sofa, half open, a corner of glossy paper peeking out. I didn't mean to look. But when something glitters where it shouldn't, the eyes go first, the heart follows later. I pulled it out gently. A cream-colored invitation card, embossed with gold. Heavy, expensive, smelling of perfume and fresh print. The words on the front read, "Family only, annual celebration." Family only. My fingers tightened around the card before I even realized it. Inside, her name shone proudly in elegant script, plus 2 family guests. 2. Not 1. Not none. 2. The wall clock ticked behind me, each second landing louder than the last. Tick. 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 Like small knocks on a door I didn't want to open. My daughter had never mentioned a party. Not a hint, not a casual remark, not even a passing complaint about what to wear. Nothing. Just silence, carefully placed silence. I sat down slowly, the card trembling between my hands. My daughter laughed at something on her phone in the other room, unaware that something inside me was shifting, cracking. I could almost hear the soft tear of it. Why hide it? Why exclude me? Was I an embarrassment? Was I not family enough? Her footsteps crossed the hallway for a moment. I hid the card under the cushion without thinking. My heart beat like it was running from something, though I hadn't moved an inch. I looked at the clock again. The ticking felt heavier now, like truth knocking from the inside. Silence doesn't lie. It just waits for you to notice. I took the invitation card out again after my daughter fell asleep. The house was dark, except for the dim yellow lamp near the sewing machine, the same one I'd used for years to mend torn uniforms, missing buttons, little accidents of a growing child. Tonight, its warm circle of light felt like a small sanctuary. I placed the blue dress, the one she had called "For Poor People," on the table. Under the lamp, the fabric looked different. Softer. Braver. As if it had been waiting for me to see it without her shadow standing beside us. A loose thread near the sleeve caught my eye. I threaded the needle slowly, my fingers steady in a way my heart wasn't. The tiny stitch felt like breathing after holding pain inside too long. Another stitch. And another. Each one pulled me together more than the dress. Outside, the wind pressed against the window, making the curtains sway like they were whispering secrets. Inside, only the hum of the iron filled the air as I pressed the dress carefully, smoothing every crease she had crushed with her careless fingers. Steam rose in gentle clouds, curling upward like fragile hope. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't planning drama. I was simply going. Not invited. Not welcomed. But going, because dignity doesn't wait for permission. The clock hit midnight. I lifted the dress, holding it against myself in the reflection of the window. My hair, streaked with years, not shame, framed my face softly. The dress fell simply, cleanly, honestly. It didn't pretend to be more. And neither did I. There was no jewelry, no fancy shawl, no expensive shoes lined up. Just a mother, a quiet storm gathering inside her, ready to walk into a room where she wasn't wanted, not to shout, not to accuse, but to exist without apology. Sometimes you don't need wealth to shine. You only need the courage to walk in wearing the truth. The hall stood in front of me like a fortress of light, tall glass doors reflecting faces I didn't know, laughter I wasn't meant to join. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the blue dress, smoothing the front one last time. The fabric felt warm against my palms, almost as if it were reminding me to breathe. I pushed the door open. Warm air rushed out first, perfume, music, the soft clink of glasses. Then came the murmurs, a ripple that spread from one corner of the hall to the other as people noticed me. Their eyes moved from my face to my dress, down to my worn shoes, then back up again. A slow scan. A quiet judgment. But I kept walking. One step. Then another. My heart beat loud, my footsteps louder. The polished floor beneath me reflected everything, the lights, the ornaments, and the outline of a woman walking alone into a world she wasn't invited to. I lifted my chin just enough to meet the reflections instead of the eyes. At the far end of the hall, waiters carried sparkling trays. A group of relatives tilted their heads in curiosity. Some whispered behind napkins, others simply stared openly, like they couldn't decide if I was brave or foolish. Is that? Who brought her? Was she on the list? The whispers floated through the air, brushing against me like cold fingers. I tightened my grip on my small handbag and kept moving. I did not search for my daughter. I did not wait for someone to stop me. The courage I carried tonight wasn't loud, but it was steady, a quiet pulse under my ribs. The chandeliers above flickered slightly, scattering trembling patterns across the floor. It felt as though the whole room breathed in at my presence, surprised that someone like me dared to cross that glass threshold without permission. But courage doesn't ask. Courage walks. Even when every eye in the room says you don't belong. I spotted her before she saw me, standing near the dessert table, surrounded by friends, laughing with the confidence of someone who had carefully crafted her world. The lighting framed her perfectly, sleek dress, polished hair, a glass of sparkling drink held delicately between two fingers. She looked untouchable. I took one more step. That was all it took. Her eyes lifted casually, then locked onto mine. For a heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. The smile slid off her face as if someone had wiped it away. Her fingers loosened. The glass slipped, tumbling in slow motion, catching the chandelier lights before shattering on the floor. The music didn't stop immediately, it stuttered, a few confused notes, then the DJ froze, switching it off mid-beat. Silence cracked through the hall. My daughter's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her face drained of color so quickly it frightened even me. One of her friends reached for her elbow, but she didn't respond. She just stared, wide, pleading, horrified, as if my very presence had peeled something open inside her. Then her knees buckled. Gasps scattered through the room as she collapsed, her body folding like paper. A waiter rushed forward. Someone shouted her name. Two young men lifted her gently, turning her onto her side. Her hands twitched, her breath came shallow and fast. I didn't run to her. I didn't push through the crowd. My feet stayed planted where I was, one hand holding a small tea plate I'd picked up from a waiter moments earlier. It trembled slightly, betraying the storm inside me. People glanced between her and me with quick, sharp eyes. The question was clear on every face. Why would seeing her own mother do this to her? I exhaled slowly, feeling a tightness grow behind my ribs. Shame, I've learned, strikes harder than anger. And tonight, it had hit her like a falling wall. They carried her to a long cream-colored sofa near the wall, fanning her gently, calling her name as if pulling her back from somewhere far. A cluster of guests gathered around her, forming a small circle of polished shoes and anxious whispers. I stayed near a round table at the edge of the hall, setting my trembling tea plate down with care. The porcelain clicked softly, a thin sound swallowed quickly by the growing murmurs. The whispers began almost immediately. A woman in a silver shawl leaned toward another guest, her voice low but her curiosity sharp. Is that her mother? Another man, adjusting his cufflinks, frowned as he watched my daughter struggle to sit upright. But why would she react like that? Did she hide her? The questions rippled outward like tiny waves hitting a quiet shore. Two cousins I barely recognized stood near the dessert bar, exchanging looks that were colder than the room's air conditioning. One whispered behind her hand, she told us her family couldn't make it, that they lived abroad. The other's eyebrows rose. Then who is that woman? I felt the sting of their words, but I didn't flinch. I kept my palms pressed against the table, grounding myself in the smooth surface, breathing slowly as if calming an invisible storm. Near the center of the room, her colleagues murmured quietly. She always said her parents weren't around. But look at her, she's clearly the mother. What was she hiding? Their judgment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Truth, once uncovered, has its own volume. Someone's gaze lingered on me a moment too long, a young woman holding a champagne flute. Her expression softened, almost apologetic, as if she understood more than she should. The room felt heavier now, not because of me, but because of the weight of her lies settling over her like dust. I straightened my posture, letting my hands rest calmly in my lap. Truth doesn't need a microphone. It simply waits for enough silence to be heard. They moved her into a smaller corner room, a quiet space away from the chandeliers and staring eyes. Soft yellow lamps glowed against the beige walls, and the curtains fluttered slightly with the air from a hidden vent. I stood near the doorway, unsure whether I belonged inside or outside, feeling like both a guest and a ghost. She stirred slowly. A faint groan slipped from her lips before her eyes fluttered open. Confusion clouded her face first, then recognition. Her gaze snapped to me like a spark hitting dry leaves. Mom. Her voice cracked. She sat up too fast, gripping the edge of the sofa. Panic washed over her features as if she'd woken into a nightmare instead of a party. She glanced toward the hallway, where muffled voices still murmured, voices that were undoubtedly speaking about her. Then she reached for me. Her fingers wrapped tightly around my wrist, cold and trembling. Mom, what are you doing here? She whispered, frantic, breath unsteady. Please, please leave. You don't understand what they'll think. Her eyes darted everywhere except my face. Everyone is talking, she whispered harshly. Just go. Please. Before more people see you. I felt her fear through her grip, sharp, desperate, selfish. Not fear for me. Fear because of me. Fear of judgment, of exposure, of her carefully built image cracking under the simple weight of my existence. I looked down at her hand on my wrist. Those same fingers had once clung to me in crowded markets, playgrounds, school gates. Now they clung for a different reason, to hide, not to hold. Mom, please, she repeated, voice shrinking into a trembling whisper. You don't belong here. People will, they'll think things. Just go quietly. The room's soft lamp hummed. A curtain shifted. Her grip tightened. Fear exposes character. And tonight, hers was laid bare in the dark corner of a party she didn't want me to be seen at. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply loosened her grip from my wrist, gently, the way a mother removes a thorn from a child's hand, and said in a calm breath, "I'm not leaving." Her shoulders stiffened. For a moment, she looked like a trapped bird, wings beating against invisible walls. I stepped out of the corner room and walked back into the hall, the music having resumed but the energy still uneasy, whispers floating like dust in the air. Crystal lights shimmered overhead, catching the silver threads on my simple dress. The scent of citrus and candle wax drifted from the decorated tables. I chose a seat at a round table near the edge of the hall, the one no one had dared to sit at yet. A lonely place, which suited me. I placed my small clutch down, adjusted the napkin, and folded my hands in my lap. Calm. Still. Unmoved. From across the hall, she watched me. Her smile, the one she forced for the sake of cameras, faltered. Every time a relative whispered something near her ear, her spine twitched. She tried laughing, but her voice sounded too sharp. She waved her hands while talking, but her fingers trembled. Yet I sat there like the eye of a storm. A waiter approached with a tray of tea. "1 cup, please," I said softly. He served me with a respectful nod, more respect than my own child had shown me. I stirred the tea with slow, delicate movements. The tiny spoon chimed lightly against the porcelain, a sound that strangely cut through the hall louder than the music. She kept glancing at me, every 30 seconds, every time someone turned to look, every time someone whispered too close. Her face tightened, her breath quickened, and her composure cracked like ice under warm hands. She wanted me invisible. So I became unmistakably present. Strength doesn't shout. It sits down, quietly, and refuses to move. The tea had grown warm in my hands when the first relative approached. A middle-aged aunt with kind eyes, someone I barely recognized, sat down beside me. She hesitated at first, glancing toward my daughter as if seeking silent permission. But curiosity, or conscience, won. "You're her mother, right?" she whispered. "Yes," I replied, taking a calm sip. Something in my tone, steady, unashamed, seemed to settle her. She folded her hands on the table. "I never heard much about you. She always said you were busy or not the social type." A familiar sting touched my chest, but I didn't let it bleed. "I've always worked long hours," I said softly. "But I was never too busy for her." More relatives drifted nearer, as if pulled by quiet gravity. Chairs shifted. Cups clinked. The circle around my table grew, small but sincere. Someone asked, "What work do you do?" "I mend clothes," I answered. "Buttons, hems, old coats, whatever people bring me." Their brows lifted, not in judgment, but in surprise. Another asked, "So you raised her alone?" I nodded. "Since she was little. I used to bring her with me to the shop after school. She'd fall asleep on a stack of fabric rolls." I smiled gently at the memory. She loved the sound of the sewing machine. A soft murmur passed through them. Not pity, understanding. Someone whispered, "She never told us that." "She said her parents were different," another added carefully. I didn't defend myself. I didn't blame her. I only said, people change their stories when they're afraid of how the truth looks. Their eyes lowered. Across the hall, my daughter watched the scene with growing panic. She could see their changing expressions, the subtle shift from admiration to confusion, from confusion to quiet disappointment. Lies melt when honesty enters a room, not with fire, but with warmth. And all I had done was tell the truth. I felt a soft hand brush the fabric of my sleeve. A fashionable aunt, the kind who always smelled of perfume and carried designer bags even to family picnics, leaned closer, her eyes widening with genuine fascination. "My goodness, this dress," she murmured, letting her fingers glide over the stitched patterns. "Where did you get it? It looks exquisite." I blinked, surprised. No one had ever used a word like exquisite for anything I wore. It's just something I fixed up at home, I replied gently. She shook her head. No, no. This detailing, look at this seam. It's handmade, isn't it? And the fabric, vintage cotton blend? Stunning. Truly stunning. Her voice wasn't quiet. People nearby heard. Heads turned. A small circle formed again, this time out of admiration, not curiosity. Compliments floated in the air like warm embers. This is real craftsmanship. It looks better than half the expensive dresses here. I love the neckline, so elegant. Every word tightened my daughter's smile further, pulling at the edges like a poorly stitched hem about to rip. She approached slowly, her heels clicking on the polished floor, her face stiff as porcelain. Can we not make a scene? She whispered through her teeth. But the aunt didn't stop. You didn't tell us your mother was so talented, she exclaimed, beaming. You're lucky, imagine having someone who can create beauty out of nothing. My daughter's eyes flickered, resentment, panic, embarrassment, all blending like colors she couldn't control. I felt the room shift. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a silent turning of heads, a quiet recalibration of judgment. For years, she had tried to polish herself into someone else's reflection, someone shinier, wealthier, untouched by humble origins. But there, under the lights, surrounded by murmurs of genuine admiration, the truth shimmered softly against my stitched dress. Value had a way of revealing itself, without price tags, without permission. And in that moment, it wasn't my dress that embarrassed her. It was the fact that everyone could finally see its worth. The dessert table glittered under soft golden lighting, towers of pastries, a chocolate fountain, delicate fruit tarts arranged like jewels. Guests drifted toward it in small clusters, laughing, sipping sparkling drinks. I had just reached for a plate when I felt a sudden, sharp pull on my arm. My daughter. Her fingers dug into my skin, her face twisted into a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. Come with me, she hissed. Before I could respond, she dragged me toward a corner near the dessert table, just far enough from the center, but not far enough from the crowd. Faces turned. Phones tilted. She didn't notice. She was too busy unraveling. Why did you come? She snapped under her breath, but anger cracked through the whisper. Why couldn't you just stay home? You always do this. Do what? I asked quietly. Embarrass me, she burst out. The word ricocheted across the room. A few nearby conversations faltered. Someone's phone was already lifted, recording. Another hand froze mid-bite, a strawberry tart halfway to their mouth. I worked so hard for this party, she continued, voice growing shrill. Everything was perfect until you walked in that dress. The dress you picked, I reminded gently. She blinked hard, chest heaving. And now everyone's talking about you, asking questions, praising you, her voice cracked. Do you know how humiliating that is? A stunned silence fell over the guests within earshot. Her friend tugged her elbow, whispering urgently, people are watching, stop. But she was past stopping. This was my night, she cried, loud enough for the room to inhale sharply. My moment. And you took it. Her voice echoed against the glass walls. Cameras were definitely recording now. I didn't move. Didn't defend myself. Didn't raise my voice. I simply stood there, the quiet center of her storm, while her carefully curated image, the polished daughter with the perfect life, crumbled, piece by fragile piece. And now, everyone could see the truth. A beautiful image means nothing if the heart underneath it has no respect. I placed my untouched teacup on the nearest table, the porcelain giving a soft clink, a sound so small, yet it cut through the tense air around us. Conversations had dipped into cautious murmurs, eyes flicking from my daughter's red, trembling face to mine. Her anger still hung in the air like smoke. I smoothed the front of my simple dress, the one she had mocked in the boutique, and inhaled slowly. My hands did not shake. My voice did not rise. There was no scene to make, no accusations to throw. "Thank you for having me," I said to the hosts, my tone steady, almost warm. The mother of the birthday girl blinked in surprise, taking a moment before managing a gentle nod. "You're welcome anytime," she murmured, her eyes soft with something like respect, maybe even regret for not reaching out sooner. My daughter took a stumbling step forward. "Mom, where are you going?" "Don't." But her voice wavered, cracking mid-sentence. She looked like a child again, frightened, exposed, unsure of which role to play now that her performance had collapsed. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because there was nothing left to say. I walked past the buffet table, past the glittering decorations she had obsessed over for weeks, past the guests who parted silently as though I were something delicate and dangerous all at once. Some whispered. Some stared. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed for reasons they would never admit aloud. But none of them spoke to me. My footsteps echoed across the marble floor, a slow and deliberate rhythm, not escape, not surrender, but a choice. A declaration. At the doorway, I paused only once, looking back just long enough to see her standing alone in the bright, merciless light of the hall, mascara smudged, pride shattered. Then I stepped outside into the night air. And that was my revenge. Not anger, not cruelty. But silence, the kind that follows truth. Rain tapped against my window in a slow, steady rhythm, the kind that settles into the walls, the kind that keeps you company when you're alone but not lonely. I sat near the table with my evening tea, watching the streetlights blur behind the raindrops. The house was quiet, almost peaceful. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up with her name, a name I had memorized long before she could even speak it. For a moment, I let it ring. Not out of spite, but because my heart needed one slow breath before meeting whatever waited on the other side. I answered on the fourth ring. Her voice came through small, shaky, as if she had shrunk inside herself. "Mom, can I come home?" There were no party lights now. No audience. No polished floors to reflect her image back at her. Just rain and truth. "I'm outside," she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. A pause followed, heavy, broken, wet with tears she was trying to swallow. The sound of her breathing trembled against the line, a softness I hadn't heard in years. "I'm sorry," she finally managed. "For everything. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have treated you like that." Another breath. "And I miss you." The rain thickened, tapping harder against the glass as if urging me to respond, to move, to choose the direction our story would turn next. I looked around my small living room, the stitched cushions, the worn curtains, the steady clock ticking on the wall. All the things she once called outdated. All the things that had quietly held me when she didn't. "I'm still here," I said softly. On the other end, she broke, a muffled sob, raw and helpless. The kind that comes only when pride has finally laid down its weapons. "I'll open the door," I whispered, standing up slowly. Because remorse grows in silence. And sometimes, so does forgiveness. When I opened the door, I didn't swing it wide. Just enough, a small gap, a quiet invitation, a reminder that some things needed careful steps. She stood there in the yellow porch light, soaked from the rain, hair clinging to her face, eyes swollen and red. Not from the weather, but from the weight she had been carrying since the night of the party. "Mom." Her voice cracked on the first word. She didn't rush inside. She didn't assume. She waited, shivering, hands trembling in front of her like she was afraid they might break if she tried to steady them. I stepped aside gently. "You can come in," I said, keeping my tone soft. She crossed the threshold as if it hurt, not physically, but somewhere deeper, where ego had built hard walls around her. Those walls were now crumbling. We sat by the window, rain still whispering against the glass. She kept her hands locked together, twisting her fingers, eyes dropping every time they met mine. "I was horrible," she said finally. "I don't even know why I did all that. I wanted to look successful. I wanted people to respect me. And I thought hiding you would make them. She broke again, covering her mouth as tears spilled freely. I didn't interrupt. Didn't lecture. Didn't raise my voice. I just listened, which sometimes is the loudest form of love. After a long silence, I reached for her hand. Her fingers flinched first, then held on as if she had been drifting for years. Forgiving you doesn't mean I forget, I said quietly. But it means I'm willing to walk forward, if you are. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks like the rain sliding down the window. Healing had begun, not with dramatic promises, but with humility and the courage to face the truth. If you want to hear how this story truly ends, stay with me, because the final lesson might be the one you needed today. I went to the sea the next morning, the place where I have always gone to think, to breathe, to let the world settle back into its right size. The wind tugged gently at my sleeves, cool and patient, as if it knew I needed a softer kind of company. Waves rose and folded in slow rhythm, steady as an old heartbeat. I sat on the familiar wooden bench overlooking the water. Salt hung in the air, and the horizon stretched wide, a reminder that life, no matter how small someone tries to make you feel, is always bigger than one moment of humiliation. As I watched the sea shifting, I remembered everything. Her voice in the boutique calling the dress for poor people. The glossy invitation hidden in her bag. The polished floors of that party reflecting her fear. The fainting, the whispers, the shaking hands. The night I walked out in silence. And then, the rain-soaked call. The door half open. The apology that trembled more than the storm behind her. I didn't replay these moments with bitterness. Not anymore. Pain changes shape when you understand it. The sea breeze brushed past me again, almost like a reminder. People often dress themselves in pride, in status, in shiny things they think give them worth. But none of those fabrics last. They tear the moment life puts weight on them. Respect, though. Real respect, the kind that grows quietly between people. That never ages. It never goes out of fashion. It never embarrasses you in a crowded room. I learned that my daughter didn't need my perfection. She needed my presence. My steadiness. My boundary. My silence at the right moment and my mercy at another. And perhaps the lesson I never said aloud, because some truths are felt, not spoken, is simple. If you wear dignity, you never walk into a room undressed.